The rain hadn't let up in hours. It was the kind of storm that swallowed sirens and drowned prayers. Water poured from the heavens like punishment. But through it all, the dog never moved. The German shepherd stood his ground, soaked and bleeding, his right eye swollen and split. He was built like a soldier, because he had been one. But now he was something more, a silent sentinel. He shielded the girl. Emily Harper was 7 years old. Her knees were tucked into her chest, her arms wrapped tight around them, as if trying to disappear into herself. She sat in the mud at the edge of a splintered porch, what was left of her family's farmhouse. Her blonde hair hung in strings, her face pale and unreadable. She hadn't blinked in minutes. Her body said trauma. Her eyes said something else, still present, watching. The dog's body was taut, every muscle primed, not to attack but to protect. When first responders moved toward her, he lowered his head slightly and a deep, low growl curled from his chest. It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. "Whoa, back up," a rescue medic shouted. "He's warning us." They halted mid-stride, ankle deep in mud and floodwater. The girl wasn't reacting. She didn't cry, she didn't scream, she didn't even flinch. From the edge of the emergency cordon, Sheriff Robert Wilson squinted through the downpour. The old lawman had lived in Silver Creek all his life, but he'd never seen a dog act like this. He lowered his bullhorn and stepped forward, cautiously. "That's no ordinary mutt," he said to no one in particular. "That dog's standing, like a Marine on post. You see his stance? Should we dart him?" Someone asked behind him. "No," Wilson snapped. "You dart him. You'll kill that girl's last bit of safety, can't you see it? He's not just guarding her, she's guarding him too." Another crack of thunder. The wind howled. Flood sirens wailed from far off. Still, neither child nor dog moved. Then slowly a hand emerged from the girl's small form. Emily's fingers trembled as they reached toward the shepherd's sodden flank. She buried them in his fur, not gripping, not pulling, just holding. And then something impossible happened. Her lips moved, a whisper, dry and cracked from months of silence. "Max stays." The dog didn't react. He didn't need to. The girl added softer. He promised. Silence fell like a curtain. The rain still poured. The rescue workers stood frozen. But something had shifted. In that moment, no one moved forward. They didn't have to. Because in that broken yard, surrounded by flood and chaos, a child who hadn't spoken since her father's death had finally found her voice, held safe by a dog who refused to leave, and neither of them was letting go. Before the rain, before the flood, before the town of Silver Creek became a shattered reflection of itself, there was silence. Not the gentle kind, not the comforting hush before sleep, but a silence born of absence. A silence that echoed through the Harper farmhouse like an unfinished sentence. The kind of silence that wrapped itself around a child and refused to let go. Emily Harper hadn't always been this way. Just a year ago, she'd filled every room with questions about stars, about trees, about why dogs tilted their heads. Her voice was music, her laughter unstoppable. Her father, John Harper, used to joke she could talk a cat off a fish cart. But that was before Kandahar, before the IED, before the knock on the door. Two men in stiff uniforms stood under the porch, light, hats in their hands. Sarah Harper knew what they would say before they said it. Knew it from the way the younger one couldn't meet her eyes. Knew it from the sudden stillness in Emily, who had run to the door expecting Dad, only to see strangers instead. They didn't need to say the words, but they did. And when they did, something inside Emily simply stopped. The diagnosis was swift. Selective mutism. Trauma triggered. Reversible, the doctors said. Manageable. But no amount of gentle coaxing, play therapy, or picture books changed the fact that Emily would not speak. She could, but she would not. Sarah tried everything. Puppets, music, whispers in the dark. But Emily responded with only nods and sketches, dozens of them. Quiet, precise drawings. 6 months passed. The war ended for them, but the silence remained. Silver Creek was supposed to be a new beginning. John's parents had left them a creaky farmhouse with slanted floors and a barn filled with ghosts. The town had a good school district, a close-knit community, a quiet Sarah thought might heal. But the quiet only deepened Emily's retreat. Sarah juggled her job at the hospital, often pulling 12-hour shifts as the town's only trauma nurse, with therapy appointments and teacher meetings. They spoke about integration plans, about sensory tools, about patience. But no one had an answer for the little girl who wouldn't speak. And then the rain came. It started with soft percussion on the windows. Nothing new for Michigan. But the downpour didn't stop. Within hours, the Holcomb Dam's pressure was climbing. Emergency alerts sounded on phones. Sarah grabbed the go bag she'd kept packed since John left. Habit, a nurse's instinct. Emily was already awake when Sarah got home, legs crossed on her bed, her room aglow with lamplight and shadows. She didn't react to the sound of sirens or the flicker of panic in her mother's voice. She just kept drawing. Pencil to page, furious, deliberate. Sarah's heart clenched. "Sweetheart, we have to go," she said, crouching to slip Emily's yellow raincoat over her shoulders. The drawing was of a dog, a large German shepherd. Its expression intense, protecting. Emily pointed to it, then pointed to the window. Sarah looked, but all she saw was darkness and the skeletal branches of the old willow tree thrashing in the wind. "Baby, I don't understand. We have to get to higher ground." By the time they reached Oak Street, it was a mess of water and headlights. National Guard trucks idled like beasts ready to stampede. People climbed aboard with soaked bags and frightened eyes. A soldier hoisted Sarah up as she lifted Emily into the last truck. They barely had time to breathe before the truck surged forward, tires grinding over debris. The flood was coming fast, the roar of collapsing structures in the distance. Far, too close. Then it happened. The jolt, the pothole, the collective scream. The truck pitched violently to the side. In the chaos, Emily disappeared. "Emily!" Sarah's world tilted. She shouted, clawed toward the back, but the truck wouldn't. "Stop." "My daughter, she fell. Ma'am, we can't." "I said stop the damn truck." She jumped. Didn't think. Just jumped. The pavement hit her like a freight train. Her knees burned, blood on her hands. But she was running, calling, searching, wading through water that rose with every heartbeat. Sheriff Robert Wilson found her hours later. Her hair matted to her face, her voice shredded. "She's out there," Sarah rasped. "She can't call for help. She won't call." "We'll find her," Wilson promised, though his eyes said something else. Miles away, Emily clung to a wooden fence, the water pulling at her ankles, then knees, then chest. Her small fingers turned white with effort. Her eyes scanned the buoy eddy horizon, unblinking. No sound, no tears, just the storm and the pounding of her heart. And then, movement. A shape cut through the water like a bullet. Massive, four-legged, determined. The German shepherd from her drawing, he was bleeding. One. "I half closed, but he swam like a machine. Purposeful. He barked once. Then again. Not frantic, focused." Emily didn't move. Max came closer. He was real as the rain. As real as her father had once been. He pressed his side to the fence, offering his body like a raft. Her hand reached, grasped the thick, wet fur. She held on. He turned and swam, dragging her gently toward a rooftop barely rising above the flood. His muscles strained, her tiny arms wrapped tighter. They climbed, fell, climbed again, reached the top, collapsed together. Breathing in sync, she touched his head, found the gash. He flinched but stayed. "You're hurt," she whispered. The words like a spell broken. The silence shattered. Her voice grew. "I'm Emily," Max whined. "Are you lost too?" He rested, his head on her lap. The wind screamed, the sirens wailed. But in that moment on that rooftop there was only a girl and a dog. "I'll stay with you," she said, "until they find us." And she did. Through the night, through the fear, through the waiting. When dawn came, the first rescue team spotted them only because of the barking. One voice, loud and relentless, cutting through the morning fog, Max, had saved her, but no one knew yet. He had also brought her voice back from wherever it had been hiding, and that was only the beginning. The waters receded, but Silver Creek would never quite be the same. Streets once lined with maple trees and mailboxes were now twisted with debris and silence. Soggy couches and collapsed porches dotted every corner. But amid the ruin, something else began to grow. Resilience. And at the heart of it, a girl and her dog, Emily Harper, was still quiet, but no longer silent. The transformation was subtle at first, a whispered word here, a nod, more decisive there. At home, she began humming as she sketched, something she hadn't done since her father died. She never left Max's side. The German shepherd followed her like a second shadow, sleeping beside her bed, waiting outside the bathroom, padding after her through the house, as if wired to her every heartbeat. School. Emily's teachers noticed it first. How she raised her hand to answer a math question, how she read aloud when Max was near. The school had made an exception to the no pets policy, and Max lay curled beneath her desk each day, alert and still, as if he understood the weight of what he carried. Sarah saw the change too, the light returning to her daughter's face, the nightmares easing. She documented everything, every sentence, every smile, every breakthrough. Max wasn't just helping Emily heal. He was stitching the pieces of their lives back together. But nothing good stays simple for long. 3 weeks after the flood, 2 men in military uniforms arrived at the farmhouse. Polite, firm, official. Max is a military asset, one of them said, flipping open a leather folder with a Department of Defense seal. His service record is classified, but we have reason to believe he was scheduled for reassignment before he went missing during the storm. We're here to retrieve him. Sarah folded her arms across her chest. He's not an asset, he's a hero. He saved my daughter's life. The second man's face softened. Ma'am, we don't doubt that, but protocol is protocol. Sarah held her ground. You're not taking him, not without a fight. After they left, Sheriff Wilson showed up 10 minutes later. He didn't knock. He just walked in and sat at the kitchen table like he'd done 100 times since John died. You saw them? Sarah asked. He nodded, sipping the coffee she handed him. Yeah, Army's starting to snoop around. They've got papers. But I've got friends, we'll buy you time. They can't take him, Sarah whispered. She'll go right back into the dark. Wilson leaned forward. Then we fight. Legal means, local leverage, public opinion. You've got more allies than you think. Word spread fast. About Max, about Emily, about the bond that had formed between a broken child and a dog with a scar above his eye. The town, still reeling from the flood, needed a symbol of hope, and they found it in the pair. The local newspaper ran a front-page feature. Storm survivor, the dog who refused to leave. Below the headline was a photo of Emily holding Max's leash outside the school. Her eyes were wide, serious, but not empty. The piece went viral. News crews rolled into Silver Creek, their vans parking along the ruined main street. Reporters asked Emily questions she didn't answer, but Max answered for her in his way, sitting still and proud as she clung to his neck. Meanwhile, Sarah met with lawyers. Free consultations at first, then pro bono volunteers. Sheriff Wilson called in a favor with the state senator. By the end of the week, they had filed a temporary injunction to delay any transfer of custody until a formal hearing could be arranged. That night, Sarah found Emily at the kitchen table with a drawing in front of her. Max on a rooftop, rain pouring around them, a small figure clinging to his side. At the bottom, in careful block letters, Emily had written, "My hero." Sarah pressed a kiss to the top of her daughter's head. "We're going to fight for him, you know that, right?" Emily didn't look up. He's scared. When I sleep next to him, I see it, the sand, the noise, the yelling. Sarah paused. You see it? Emily nodded. In his dreams. It wasn't the first time she'd said something like this. Sarah chalked it up to imagination, but something about the way Emily said it, like it was fact, made her pause. Across town, Max had become a minor celebrity. Children made posters of him for school. Local businesses hung signs. Max saved Emily, thank you. A bakery sent over a box of bone-shaped cookies, peanut butter and oat. But none of the attention eased Sarah's nerves. Every day she expected another knock at the door, another summons, another paper signed by someone far away who had never watched their child fall silent and come back because of a dog. And then came the flyer. A new veterinary clinic opening on Main Street. Silver Creek Animal Clinic, run by a Dr. James Richardson, DVM, specializing in large animals and working dogs. Sarah stared at the name. It prickled at something she couldn't name. She set the flyer on the fridge with a magnet. Emily didn't seem to notice. A week later, Max limped after their morning walk. The scar above his eye had healed, but Sarah noticed he favored his left hind leg. Nothing too dramatic, but enough to make her pick up the phone. The receptionist was friendly. Dr. Richardson can see you Wednesday at 4. When they arrived, the clinic was bright, warm, clean. Emily clutched Max's leash tightly. Max sniffed the air and stayed close. The vet's assistant led them into a small exam room. A jar of dog treats, posters of canine anatomy. Emily crouched on the floor, whispering into Max's ear. The door opened. A man in his 40s entered. Tall, composed, with gray at his temples. He didn't speak at first, just stared. "So," he said finally, "this is the famous Max." Max growled, low, deep. Not fearful, but not friendly. Emily stood quickly, placing herself between Max and the vet. "He's my dog," she said. Not a whisper, not timid. Dr. Richardson's eyes narrowed. "I know him. I was his handler." The room tilted. Sarah stepped forward. "You're the one from his records?" "They're redacted," he said quietly. "But yes, he was mine." Max growled again, louder now, and Emily said without hesitation, "He doesn't want to see you." Richardson didn't flinch. "He remembers more than most dogs do." "So does she," Sarah snapped. "He saved her life. He's not going anywhere." Richardson exhaled slowly. "We'll see." When they left the clinic, Emily refused to let go of Max's collar. Her small hand trembled, but her voice didn't. "He's scared of him. He remembers what he did." Sarah didn't ask what she meant. Some part of her believed it. All of it. That night, while the town slept and the rain tapped gently at the windows, Emily lay curled on her bed with Max beside her. She whispered to him, "I won't let them take you. You found me. Now I'll find a way to keep you." In the darkness, Max raised his head. One ear perked, as if he understood, as if he believed her. And Sarah, standing quietly at the doorway, knew something else. Their fight had only just begun. The sign had gone up overnight. Silver Creek Animal Clinic. Dr. James Richardson, DVM, specializing in working dogs and large animals. It seemed like a blessing for a town that had been without veterinary services since old Doc Mendez retired 3 years earlier. But for Emily Harper and her dog Max, that name would soon become something else entirely. A wound reopened. Sarah Harper had been worried about Max's limp. He favored his left hind leg during long walks, and though the gash above his eye had healed into a jagged scar, she wasn't sure if there was internal damage. So when she made the appointment, she didn't think much of the name on the sign. She didn't know yet that the man behind the name was already tangled in their lives, deeper than she could guess. Inside the clinic, it smelled of antiseptic and pine wood. Emily waited in the corner play area, flipping through a picture book, while Max sat beside her, alert but calm. Sarah filled out paperwork at the counter, nodding politely to the young receptionist who assured her, "Dr. Richardson will see Max in just a moment." And then he stepped in. Tall, late 30s, lean with military posture. His dark hair was streaked with silver at the temples. He wore a white coat, sleeves rolled, and a small service pin on his lapel that Sarah recognized immediately. A K-9 unit. Emblem? So, this is the famous Max, he said, smiling as he turned toward them. The local hero. Max reacted before Sarah could respond. The growl started low, deep in his throat, then surged as the German shepherd rose to his feet, his body tense and rigid. Emily stood immediately, placing herself between the dog and the man. "Max, no," she said urgently. "He's a doctor, he helps." But Max wasn't listening. His hackles were up, his ears flat. He backed up slowly, pressing against Emily, his eyes never leaving Richardson. The vet froze. His expression shifted from surprise to something unreadable. "That's not just any military dog," he said slowly, voice low. "That's Unit. 7's Max, service number K97734. Sarah's breath caught. "You recognize him?" "I should," he said. "I was his handler. For 4 years." The room fell into a stillness more deafening than Max's growl. The next few minutes passed. In a haze of tension, Richardson kept his distance as he conducted the examination. Sarah followed his instructions, positioning Max carefully. Emily never left Max's side, her small hand constantly buried in his fur. The atmosphere was clinical, but under the surface, volatile. Physically, Max was in remarkable condition, Richardson admitted. The limp would improve with controlled movement. He offered a treatment plan, an exercise routine. But then, just as they were preparing to leave, Richardson cleared his throat. "Ms. Harper, I should inform you that as Max's former handler, I have certain legal rights regarding his custody." Sarah stiffened. "What are you saying exactly?" "I'm saying that while the military granted you temporary guardianship, my claim supersedes that. Military working dogs often retire to their handlers. It's standard procedure." Emily looked up sharply. "But you abandoned him," she said. Her voice didn't tremble. "He was in the transport because you left him." Richardson's face twitched. "That's not exactly—" "He remembers," Emily said, firmer now. "He remembers what happened." Sarah stepped forward. "Are you saying you're going to take him away from her?" "I'll be filing paperwork this week," he replied, his tone now professional, distant. "Good day, Ms. Harper, Emily." The ride home was silent. Emily stared out the window, one hand gripping Max's collar tightly. When they pulled into the driveway, she spoke. "He's scared of him," she said. "Honey, it's complicated," Sarah said carefully. "No, it's not," Emily insisted. "Max saved me. Now we have to save him." Word spread fast. Silver Creek was still a small town, still raw from the flood, and the idea of someone trying to take the town's hero didn't sit well. Sheriff Wilson came by that evening. Richardson filed a formal petition, he said, sipping coffee in Sarah's kitchen. "Says he has documentation. Chain of command's murky in cases like this." "Can he really do it?" Sarah asked. "Take Max? Legally?" "Maybe," the sheriff replied. "But I've called in some favors. We're holding a town council meeting tomorrow night. I think the people deserve to hear both sides." Emily, in the living room, was reading to Max like always. The dog lay beside her, his breathing even, eyes half closed but alert. The domestic quiet felt fragile. Later that night, Sarah sat hunched over legal documents, the blue light of her laptop throwing long shadows across the kitchen. Most custody cases favored the original handler, but exceptions existed, especially when the dog had been retired unofficially or when the handler's fitness was in question. At midnight, the sheriff returned with a manila folder. County. "Clerk owed me a favor," he said. Inside were Richardson's unclassified service records. Impressive, polished, clean, too clean. A gap stood out. A 3-month missing period between final deployment and discharge. "Standard protocol doesn't allow that," Wilson said. "Something's buried in there." From upstairs came the sound of footsteps. Emily appeared on the stairs, Max right beside her. "Is everything okay?" she asked sleepily. Sarah hesitated. "We're just trying to figure out how to keep Max with us." Emily nodded. "He's afraid of Dr. Richardson," she said. "Something bad happened." Sheriff Wilson raised an eyebrow. "How do you know that, Emily?" The child sat down at the table, Max curling up beneath her. "He shows me," she said. "Shows you? When he's sleeping and I'm holding him, I see what he sees." "What does he see?" the sheriff asked gently. "A place with lots of sand, loud noises, people in uniforms like Daddy wore, and Dr. Richardson yelling at Max, saying it was his fault." Sarah felt her stomach tighten. "And what does Max do?" "He cries," Emily whispered. "Even when he's awake." The room went still. Even the sheriff, a man with 60 years and 1,000 stories under his belt, had no reply. That night Sarah didn't sleep. Neither did Max. And in a town still recovering from disaster, new fault lines were forming, ones rooted in memory, guilt, and a child's unwavering loyalty. Part 5 would begin not in a courtroom, but in a gymnasium-turned-council chamber, where truth, loyalty, and healing would collide under the flickering lights of a town still finding its voice. Part 5. The town divided, approx 1,200+ words. The community center was louder than usual that night, chairs scraping, voices murmuring, heels pacing on concrete. There was tension in the air, thick and restless, not unlike the storms that had nearly drowned Silver Creek weeks ago. But this wasn't about weather. This was about a dog, and what he meant to a girl who had once lived inside silence. Mayor Gladys Sullivan raised her gavel and struck the table twice. The chatter dimmed. Her expression, always composed, bore the kind of weariness only leaders under siege understood. "We are here," she said, "to review the custody petition filed by Dr. James Richardson for the military working dog, formerly known as K97734, now called Max, who currently resides with the Harper family." She looked down the rows of faces, veterans, teachers, parents, neighbors. Nearly every chair was full. On one side of the front row, Sarah Harper, her arm wrapped protectively around her daughter. Emily sat quietly, her hands resting on Max's back. The dog was calm, eyes forward, posture rigid like an unflinching sentry. On the other, Dr. James Richardson, in a neatly pressed shirt, his face unreadable, alone. Mayor Sullivan nodded. "Dr. Richardson, you may begin." He stood slowly, buttoning his jacket with the practiced movements of someone trained in discipline. His voice was smooth, measured, but strained at the edges. "Max is not just a dog. He is a highly trained asset, a hero of multiple tours in Afghanistan. I was his handler. For 4 years we served together. I trusted him with my life, and he never let me down." A flicker passed across his face. Regret, perhaps. "I was injured during my final mission. When I recovered, Max was gone, transferred without my knowledge. I only learned of his whereabouts after the flood. I didn't come here seeking conflict. I came to bring him home, to the person who trained him, who understands his needs, who owes him everything." There was polite applause from a few corners, respect for a soldier, but the room didn't shift. Not yet. Sarah stood. No notes. No podium. Just her truth. "I'm not a soldier," she began. "I'm a nurse, a mother. And 3 months ago, I was just another widow trying to help my daughter live again." She placed a hand on Emily's shoulder. "When my husband died in Afghanistan," Emily stopped talking. Not a whisper. Not even to me. "We moved here for a fresh start. It didn't work. Nothing worked. Until the flood. Until Max." Her voice cracked, but she didn't stop. "That dog found my child in the storm. He stayed with her, protected her, gave her something I couldn't. And since then, she's begun to return to us, word by word, day by day. He's not just her support animal. He's the reason she came back to life." A hush fell over the hall. Then a woman stood. Emily's teacher. She described how the girl who once scribbled in silence now raised her hand to answer questions. How Max lay quietly at her feet in class, alert, calm, never disruptive. Next, a therapist. She talked about progress charts, the way Emily began, naming her emotions, identifying her fears. How Max's presence regulated her anxiety faster than any medication ever had. "I've worked with hundreds of children on the spectrum," the therapist said. "This bond isn't just real, it's rare. You don't break that without consequence." The mayor nodded, taking notes. Then she said, "Captain Thomas Jenkins, you've requested to speak." A man in uniform stepped forward. Metals gleamed. Under the lights, he carried himself with a weight that silenced the room before he said a word. "There was a mission," he began. "Classified. In Kandahar. Max was on that mission. He did what he was trained to do. He signaled an IED, a clear alert, but his handler, Lieutenant Richardson, overrode it, believed it was a false positive. Minutes later, the vehicle convoy hit the device. Gasps. 3 men died, 2 others were wounded. An inquiry followed. The Army concluded handler error, but the report was sealed. Richardson received an honorable discharge. Max was labeled unpredictable and sent for reevaluation. Richardson stood abruptly. "You didn't listen," Captain Jenkins cut in. "That's what the report says, that you ignored him, and afterward, you blamed him." People were murmuring now, whispers rising like wind through dry grass. Emily stood. Everyone went still. She didn't look scared, just small, steady. "You yelled at him," she said quietly, pointing to Richardson. "In the dream, when everything turned red. You said, 'He failed you.'" The room froze. Some stared at her. Others turned toward Max, whose eyes never left her face. "He didn't," she added. "He tried to help, but you wouldn't hear him." Richardson's mouth opened, closed. His hands trembled slightly. "That's not fair," he murmured. "You don't understand." "But Max does," Emily said. Max's tail moved once, just a soft thump on the wooden floor. Silence. The mayor cleared her throat. "This town knows hardship. We've lost homes, lost lives, but we survived by standing together, and what I've heard tonight isn't about ownership. It's about responsibility, about who's best for Max and what's best for this child." She looked at both parties, then delivered the verdict. Effective immediately, Max is granted full retirement from military service. Custody will remain with the Harper family, permanently. The room broke into applause. Sarah pulled Emily into her arms. Richardson didn't sit. He just stood there, unmoving, then slowly turned toward Max. His voice was low. Not for the crowd, just for the dog. "I'm sorry," he said. "I should have protected you better. You saved lives. You saved her." Max didn't bark, didn't growl. He rose slowly, walked 1 step forward, and gently nudged Richardson's hand with his nose. Emily nodded. "He forgives you." And maybe, for the first time, Richardson forgave himself. Spring touched Silver Creek with hesitant fingers. The floodwaters had long receded, but the scars remained in cracked pavement, gutted homes, and the quiet eyes of survivors. Yet life pushed forward, the way it always does when grief begins. To loosen its grip, Sarah Harper returned to the hospital part-time. Emily returned to school full-time. With Max, the school made an exception. They had to. Every therapist, every educator who met Emily saw it. The unspoken bond between girl and dog. Max didn't just calm her. He anchored her. He understood her before she spoke. He noticed shifts in her breathing, posture, tone. When her anxiety spiked, he would nudge her wrist until she touched his fur and began to breathe again. Soon he wasn't just helping Emily. He was visiting classrooms, sitting beside children too anxious to read aloud, lying down next to kids during math tests. The principal joked Max was doing more for their behavioral scores than any curriculum, but none of it happened by accident. Dr. James Richardson had quietly begun working with Emily and Sarah. Twice a week he arrived with charts, clickers, and structured training routines, not to reclaim Max, but to help preserve what Max had become. Therapy dog certification was the goal. Max's past, his discipline, training, reflexes, made the transition easier than expected. But Richardson didn't. Stop there. He encouraged Emily to become part of the training process. Show me how he calms you, he'd ask. Teach him how to help someone else. For a child who had once stopped speaking, Emily had become unexpectedly eloquent when explaining Max's behavior. She drew diagrams, made flashcards, tracked his patterns. He gets nervous around certain men, she told Richardson one day. Men who walk too loud. He'd paused, pen in hand. Why do you think that is? Emily just shrugged. He remembers things. Some days were harder than others. Max still startled at sharp sounds, still winced at helicopter blades in the distance. Richardson taught Sarah exercises to reinforce calm responses. He trained Emily how to issue safe cues. He needs a job. Richardson explained, dogs like him, they heal by helping. Then we're healing each other, Sarah replied. Their makeshift team had found rhythm. But Silver Creek's calm was a fragile one. One evening, Sheriff Wilson knocked on Sarah's porch with a bottle of root beer and a folder tucked under his arm. Mind if I sit? She poured 2 glasses and motioned toward the swing. You look like you've been reading trouble, she said. I've been digging into Richardson's old unit, mostly redacted, but one thing stood out. Someone's been running background checks on everyone tied to the Kandahar mission. Sarah stiffened. Who? Can't say. Records were accessed from a private IP, out of D.C. You think someone's looking for Max? I think someone never stopped. Across the yard, Emily played with Max and Tommy, Richardson's son. The 2 children were building a stick fort near the edge of the woods. Does James know? She asked. Not yet. Wilson replied. But he's watching too. I caught him installing a new lock on his vet clinic's back door. And 2 cameras. Said it was for insurance. Later that night, Sarah found Richardson in the clinic's office. He was reviewing surveillance footage. You expecting company? She asked. He didn't turn around. Let's just say I've seen shadows before they became threats. You think they're coming back? I think they never left. The first snowstorm hit in late November. It wasn't unusual. Michigan had hard winters, but this one was different. The temperature plummeted faster than expected. Ice-coated power lines, phone service dropped. By dusk, the town was shut down. Sarah, Emily, and Max were home, preparing for a night without electricity. Richardson called around 6 p.m. Tommy's stuck here with me. His mom couldn't get through the roads. I'll keep him overnight. Emily was disappointed. We were going to paint Christmas ornaments. Tomorrow, Sarah promised. We'll bake cookies too. By 8 p.m., the storm was howling. Wind slammed against the windows. Max paced near the front door. Something's wrong, Emily whispered. He hears something. Sarah frowned. Max was trained to alert to danger. But outside, everything was white and howling. Minutes later, the power went out. Sarah lit candles. Just a storm, sweetheart. We've been through worse. But the quiet didn't feel safe, and then Max barked. Loud, urgent, focused. He ran to the back door, scratched, barked again. Sarah opened the door. Nothing but snow. She turned, and the house was empty. Emily? No answer. Panic surged. She ran through the rooms, then out into the storm. Max's tracks vanished in the snow, but next to them, smaller prints, another set, then tire marks. Sarah fell to her knees. They were gone. Emily, Max, Tommy, gone, taken. The industrial park lay like a scar at the edge of Silver Creek, rusted, forgotten, half swallowed by snow and silence. But inside one of its hollow shells, something far from forgotten stirred in the dark. Emily, Max, and a terrified 5-year-old boy named Tommy. Sarah's boots crunched over packed snow as she, Sheriff Wilson, and Dr. James Richardson moved fast through the storm. Captain Jenkins followed closely behind, armed and alert. The warehouse loomed ahead, its windows pulsing faintly with interior light. This is it, Richardson whispered. I saw their vans here 2 days ago. It's where they're running ops, surveillance, extraction. He paused, jaw tight. And if they've started experimentation, Max is in danger. Sarah didn't flinch. So is my daughter. From inside, muffled cries. Max's bark strangled sharp. Sarah's heart surged in her throat. Jenkins gave quick hand signals. His 2 men flanked left and right. Wilson readied his sidearm. Sarah tightened the scarf around her face. Richardson was pale, limping, but he moved with purpose. They breached the side-loading dock first. Inside, crates, tarps, rows of electronics. Surveillance gear, laptops still running. A back room glowed, and then a scream. Emily's. Sarah bolted. Wilson right behind. They followed the sound, turned a corner, and froze. Max was strapped to a table, his body spasming under controlled pulses of electricity. A mercenary in a black tactical vest held the control pad, thumb hovering again over the trigger. Emily had broken free from her restraints. She stood between them now, small, furious, terrified. "Don't touch him," she shrieked. "Get the girl," one man yelled. But then Max, mid-shock, let out a growl, deep, primal. Emily turned to him. She touched his side, her small hand resting above the matted fur. Everything stopped. Max's body, mid-convulsion, suddenly stilled. "Max," she whispered. "I'm here. I see you." It wasn't magic. It was something older, more real. The kind of truth that can't be taught. Max let out a low whine. His eyes rolled to meet hers. Recognition bloomed in the space between pain and peace. Sarah moved fast, knocked the controller out of the mercenary's hand. Wilson fired once, into the air. The other men froze. Jenkins' team burst in from the east corridor. "Weapons down, now!" In the chaos, Richardson moved to the table. He loosened the straps around Max, trembling. "I never wanted this," he said aloud. "I tried to get him out. I faked the failure report. I thought I was protecting him." No one spoke. Emily knelt beside Max. The dog leaned into her. Captain Jenkins stepped forward, his voice low but fierce. "These aren't government-authorized actions. You're under arrest. Attempted kidnapping, unauthorized biointervention on military property, endangering minors." One mercenary tried to speak. Jenkins raised his hand. "Save it for the tribunal." Sarah turned to Richardson. "You faked his records?" He nodded. "I knew Meridian would want to dissect what made Max special. It wasn't his training. It was his bond. The connection. What you saw tonight, it's real. I couldn't let them turn it into a weapon." "Then why not tell the truth?" Wilson demanded. "I was scared," Richardson said quietly. "Scared of what they'd do to me. Scared they'd still get him anyway." Sarah stared at him for a long time. Then she looked down at Max, at Emily holding his face in her hands. A child and a dog. A bond no lab could fabricate. "Let's get them out of here," she said. As they emerged into the snow-choked night, Max walked on his own. Stiff, but proud. Emily held his leash. Tommy, clutching a blanket, rode in Wilson's arms. Behind them, the warehouse lights flickered. The illusion of safety was gone, but what had been saved was something deeper. Truth, loyalty, love, and a girl who refused to let go. But the aftermath wasn't quiet. Hours later, as Sarah sat with Emily at the community center, blankets wrapped around them, Max lying protectively. Nearby, Jenkins returned from interrogation. "We recovered hard drives," he said. "Footage, logs, communications. Meridian wasn't just testing dogs. They were trying to map the emotional neural signatures between handlers and animals. Emily's readings through Max broke their models." Sarah blinked. "She did what?" "Her empathy activated something. You saw it yourself." He stopped convulsing. Responded to her touch before sedation. They weren't prepared for that. That's why they escalated. Richardson sat nearby, head in his hands. "That bond, it's not trainable, it's not a program, it's a choice. That girl and that dog chose each other." Jenkins handed Sarah a sealed folder. "The military will shut this down quietly, but Max is officially retired. No more. Trackers, no more claims, he's hers now. Full custody, legal and final." Sarah looked over at her daughter. Emily, fast asleep, her hand still on Max's paw. Outside, the storm finally began to break. Spring arrived quietly in Silver Creek, not with fanfare, but with the steady melt of snow and the soft return of birdsong. The creek, once a monstrous force that devoured streets and homes, now bubbled gently past its banks, its surface glittering. In morning light, flowers pushed through thawed soil beside broken sidewalks. The town was still healing, but it was healing. On the porch of the old farmhouse on Willow Lane, Sarah Harper sat with a cup of coffee, watching the backyard unfold into new life. Emily and Tommy were there, crouched over a patch of wild violets, whispering about something only children could find important enough to argue over with such intensity. And beside them, tail twitching lazily, was Max. His gait had a stiffness, now a slight limp in his back leg that never fully went away after the warehouse. But he wore it like an old soldier wore his scars, with quiet pride. He was no longer K97734. He was Max, retired, respected, and finally, home. Emily's voice rose above the breeze. "Max, sit." The dog obeyed instantly, settling onto the grass like a knight kneeling before a princess. She laughed, a rich, full sound that had been unthinkable just months ago. Sarah smiled. The therapists had called Emily's recovery miraculous. But Sarah knew better. It wasn't a miracle. It was Max. Inside the house, the study had been converted into a play and training room. Flashcards lined the walls, treat jars labeled with sticky notes. And every Sunday, Dr. James Richardson came by, not as a threat, not even as a vet, but as someone slowly carving out redemption one lesson at a time. He trained Max now with Emily's help, preparing him for his new role as a therapy dog for children with trauma. It was Emily's idea. "He helped me," she said. "Now he can help them." One evening, after Richardson had left and Tommy had been picked up, Emily sat curled on the couch, Max resting against her legs. The television hummed in the background, but her gaze was far away. "Mom?" she asked softly. Sarah looked up from her book. "Do you think Daddy sent Max to us?" The question landed gently, like a snowflake on warm skin. Sarah set her book aside, moved closer, and wrapped an arm around her daughter. "I think if there's a way love can travel beyond where we can see it, then yes. I think he did." Emily leaned into her. "I thought so." Outside, the sky began to bruise into dusk. Fireflies winked to life in the field beyond the fence, and from somewhere deep in the woods, an owl called. Later that night, Sarah paused in Emily's doorway. Max lay across the foot of the bed, curled, protectively around the girl, his breathing deep and even. Emily's hand rested on his back. They looked like two souls who had pulled each other out of the dark and now stood guard together in the light. Sarah whispered into the room, not expecting. "An answer, thank you." And maybe, just maybe, Max heard her. Closing note to audience. Spring has come to Silver Creek, but the story isn't over. Secrets still sleep beneath the snow, and Emily and Max's journey is far from done. What awaits in the next chapter? Stay tuned. Episode 2 drops next week. Don't miss it.